Hello, viewers. Today on our channel, we will be exploring the story of a drug addict. How does addiction begin? How does it take control of a person? And is it really possible to escape that darkness? Someone who once surrendered their life to substances is now confronting their past. In their own words, they'll share their experiences, regrets, and journey to recovery. A real confession. A real struggle. If you're ready, let's begin.
Hello, I'm Karen. I'm 23 years old. I've been addicted to meth for about 4 years. For a year and a half, I only used meth. Then, I had a period where I tried to quit. But when I started again, meth had already worn me out so much that people around me would say, "Here, take this. It'll help you relax. This one's better." At that point, I had already been introduced to every substance.
Why did you start using drugs?
I started because I had taken too many emotional hits. People would say, "You're too naive, you're too soft," and it made me feel inadequate. I thought I was being walked over because I was a little more emotional than others in the environment I was in. And that's why I started. I was with my friends at a villa. Everyone was jumping into the water, but I was scared. "You can't do it anyway," they said. Then one of my friends turned to me and said, "Take this. You won't remember anything tomorrow." 4 years have passed, and now here I am. The first time I took it, I heard a sound in my head. Zank. I don't know what that was, but suddenly my movements sped up. I jumped into the water and got out. That rush of doing something I had feared filled me with a strange kind of confidence. After that, I just wanted to relive that first moment over and over again. In meth environments, when someone new arrived, I knew I would never feel that high again. But watching them experience it for the first time gave me some kind of satisfaction. We would sit there, watching, saying, "Look, they're living it. They love me, they care about me." But the truth was, nobody cared about anyone. I just convinced myself that I was valued, that I mattered.
When did you realize you were addicted?
I had a friend, someone who had once been addicted but managed to quit. He had truly touched my life in a good way. I wanted to distance myself from him, but I couldn't. I also had a boyfriend at the time. I didn't want to break up with him either. Sometimes I'd call him and say things like, "I feel really bad today." Then, one night, that friend called me. When my boyfriend saw his name on my phone, he got furious. He dragged me to a warehouse and beat me to the point of death. I was lying on the ground for hours, barely breathing. Eventually, some people came and took me from there. I was in intensive care. And why did he do this to me? Because he thought I was cheating on him. He was also using meth. But he never even asked me, "Who is that calling? Why did they call you? What's going on?" Before that, I had seen videos about how girls were lured deeper into addiction, how they were taken to places like that warehouse and given even more drugs until they were completely dependent. I had heard stories about it, but I still believed that escaping addiction was possible. But that night, I finally understood I was addicted.
How did addiction affect you physically and mentally?
Of course, I didn't look like this back then. I had dropped to 39 kilos. There's a condition called anorexia, a psychological disorder that makes you lose weight. Meth did the same thing to me. It also made my body cramp up. I was constantly trembling from fear. I eventually turned to other substances. But this time, the highs and crashes were all in my head. For example, if I saw a police officer on the street, I was convinced my parents had turned me in. "They're coming to take me. They don't want me anymore. I started isolating myself from them. I didn't even have a place to stay anymore, and my physical appearance kept getting worse. My face and eyes were always covered in bruises. I also believed something was inside my face. I kept picking at my skin. I had open wounds everywhere. Eventually, I went to a recovery center, and that's where my face finally healed.
What was your biggest regret while under the influence?
Honestly, everything was a regret, but I think what hit me the hardest was what happened a few weeks before I went to the recovery center. At that time, I wasn't even able to use anymore because I was always with my family. They knew. They would look me in the eyes, and they could tell. So I started bringing a friend over to my house. But that day, I was desperate. I wanted to go out. She couldn't bring the substance into the house, and I couldn't get it myself. But I wanted it. I wanted it so badly. And I thought to myself, I'll be going to the recovery center soon anyway. No one will give me anything there. So I need to take as much as I can now. Let me have one last binge. I even laughed at myself for thinking like that. But then, my father had a heart attack. He was so angry at me, but he couldn't bring himself to hit me. Instead, he punched himself in the face, over and over again. His blood pressure spiked, and right in front of me, he collapsed. I just stood there. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. All I thought was, I hope the ambulance gets here fast. And as soon as my father was taken to the hospital, I went right back to using. At that time, I had a childhood friend with me. She slapped me across the face. "Shame on you," she yelled. "Is this all you've become? How much lower can you go?" But even in that moment, I couldn't wake up. I wasn't me anymore.
What did you learn from your recovery process?
For the longest time, I thought fearlessness was strength. But I learned something in recovery. Being fearless actually means being out of control. In the meth world, nobody is in their right mind. But when you're in it, you don't even notice. Because you're one of them. I had been clean for 8 days when people still looked at me from a distance and said, "Oh, she's definitely on something." I would stare in the mirror and think, I look normal. But from the outside, it was painfully obvious. And the worst part, even though I was convinced I was normal, I kept trying to convince others too. Whenever someone asked, "Are you using something?" I would get angry. "Where did you get that idea? What are you talking about?" But deep down, I knew it was obvious.
How did your family realize you were using drugs?
At first, they noticed changes in my behavior, but assumed it was just depression. I was very involved with my little brother, focused on my studies, and working hard. They thought all the responsibility had overwhelmed me and that it would eventually pass. But here's the real problem. Our families never expect this from us. They think we're incapable of such things. But the truth is, this has nothing to do with being young or old. You could be a successful businessman and still destroy your life in an instant. I had a university degree, but I still threw my life away. For a long time, my family didn't notice because they never thought I was capable of doing something like this. But eventually, they started picking up on things. Coming home late, my erratic behavior, my constant swearing, the way I talked to my father without any respect. No matter how rebellious you are, there's always a level of respect toward your father. But I had lost that completely. My mom would stand at the door crying, begging me, "Please don't go out tonight. Stay with us." And I would snap, "Give me the key. Give me the key," like I was completely out of my mind. Then, one day, my dad sent me a picture. It was a table full of drug bags, pills, lighters, everything, as if he had placed them there himself. But he had found them. Parents just know. You can't hide it forever. When my dad showed me the picture, I was still lying. Dad, those aren't mine. You won't find mine there. Those belong to my friend. At that moment, a voice in my head said, "All right, life is over." I was mocking myself, but I was also fully aware of how dirty my life had become. I knew exactly what I was doing, but I also felt like there was no way back, that I had no other choice. Because at that point, I believed I couldn't even drink water without using. At first, I would think, I need meth to drink water. I need to relax first. But in reality, the more I used, the more I lost control of myself. I just didn't realize IT back then. I kept telling myself, if I don't take meth, I won't even be able to make my bed. If my mom asked me to do something, I believed I had to take a hit first to be able to respond.
How do you feel when you remember these things now?
I feel helpless. I used to think I was fearless, but in reality, everything I did just made me weaker. And regret never leaves me alone. I didn't just make my own mother cry. I also gave drugs to my friends, leaving their mothers feeling just as helpless. That thought has been haunting me a lot lately. It makes me question myself. And honestly, I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't even want to remember.
Did you ever cause someone to start using drugs?
I never got someone started, but I did make someone use more, and that's just as bad. One of my friends even took his own life because of this. And at the time, I didn't even care. I even joked about it. One day, I was at home, getting ready to go to work, waiting for my mom to get back from her job. As soon as she came home, I was going to leave my little brother with her and head out. It was always a rush. Then my phone rang. It was my friend. "I feel terrible. You need to come here right now." He told me he was going to commit suicide, but he had already been using. I was the one supplying him. And honestly, I didn't even really like him that much at the time. I laughed and said, all right, let's do it together in an hour." And I hung up. And he actually did it. He climbed to the top of a building, and he jumped. But here's the thing about meth. It makes you feel things that aren't real. For example, I would constantly see myself getting shot, and I could actually feel the pain.
What if you had gone to your friend that day?
Maybe I could have told him, "This isn't real. It will pass," because he used to comfort me all the time. But I didn't go, and he died.
Did you have any sense of time while using?
Not at all. We didn't have a sleep schedule. Time completely lost its meaning. If you asked me if a day or 8 days had passed, I wouldn't have been able to tell you.
Do you think parents misunderstand addiction?
Yes, because they don't know what drugs actually do. To them, someone using drugs should just pass out and sleep. But when I slept, it meant I wasn't using. When my dad tried to wake me up, I wouldn't respond. And he would ask, "What did she take that's making her sleep like this?" But actually, when I was on meth, I was completely awake. They didn't understand that, so they reacted the wrong way. I couldn't explain it to them. My little brother, though, he started to figure it out. "Why are you always awake? Why don't you sleep at night?" I would brush it off with excuses. "I sleep during the day." And honestly, that part was true. I would be awake all night. Then, I'd sleep for just a few hours during the day, and that short nap felt like I had slept for 10 days.
Did you ever see an end to your addiction?
There's no end to addiction. Only two options. One, you get locked up and die before you actually die. Two, or you keep using until you eventually die. I was already at my breaking point. I had started injecting, and that was going to kill me.
Did you know you were going to die?
Yes, I could feel it. Before I went to rehab, I was already under surveillance. Someone close to me was being watched, and because of that, I was being watched too. I knew that either I was going to take one last dose and die, or I was going to get arrested and locked up. And honestly, I probably wouldn't have survived in there either.
Did you have hallucinations?
Yes, a lot of them, especially a little child. Even thinking about it now makes me sweat. I felt like a schizophrenic. This child was always with me.
What did you do with him?
Whenever I was going to use, I would send him away. I would really look at him, talk to him. Whenever I was in trouble, he was always by my side. But I was the only one who could see him. Did you know he wasn't real? No, I really saw him. I even wore headphones all the time, not to listen to music, but to blend in. When I walked down the street, people would stare at me, wondering why I was talking to myself. But with headphones on, I looked like I was just having a phone conversation.
What did you say to this child?
For example, when I was about to go get more, I would warn him, "Don't be scared, okay? You stay here. You don't have to go inside. I'll be right back. Just wait in the car." It all felt so real to me.
When you first arrived at rehab, were you still seeing him?
Yes. At first, not seeing him was a huge problem. I was so used to him being there. He even had a name. I kept expecting him to just pop up and say, "I'm here. Don't be scared." I had believed in him so much that his disappearance terrified me.
What about the teddy bears?
Even the toys in the house terrified me. I thought I was being watched through their eyes. Had you ever thought that before? Yes, I had seen videos about it before. They're watching you. They're recording you. At first, I laughed it off. That kind of stuff doesn't happen with meth. But then I realized I hadn't stepped onto my own balcony for 3 months. I was convinced someone was watching me from the rooftop. That's why I couldn't go outside. The teddy bears in the house, my little brother's teddy bears. I truly believed there were cameras in their eyes. Let's say I had a problem with you. Immediately, I'd think, "You're watching me, aren't you?"
Do some addicts see their parents as spies?
Yes, some do. I had a close friend like that. He burned his mother's house down.
What happened?
While he was using, he would constantly talk about his mother. "She's going to turn me in to the police." Whenever he saw cops, he'd think, "She reported me." But this paranoia had been inside him since childhood. He believed his mother had sold him out, that she would hand him over to some international organization, that they were getting inside his brain, controlling his thoughts, trying to harm him. And eventually, it all became real in his mind.
So what did he do?
One day, he went to his mother's house. He was upstairs. His family was downstairs. His father kept banging on the ceiling, yelling, "Get out of there." The family downstairs knew something was wrong. But upstairs, We were a whole army of addicts. Eventually, we all left the house. But he didn't. He went out to the back balcony and threw fire into his mother's room. Her bed, her belongings, everything burned. At that moment, he didn't even care if she was inside. Maybe he didn't even know if she was sleeping there. But all he could think was, they're getting inside my brain. They're selling me out. They're spying on me. So he acted out of pure fear. After that, whenever he saw police, he would think, did my mom turn me in too?
Have you ever felt the fear of death?
Yes, it's horrifying. And I've regretted everything I've done. But addiction doesn't care about your regrets. No matter how much I swore to God that I'd never use again, I always went back.
What was your worst near-death experience?
The first time, I had only been sober for 2 days. People around me warned me, don't take this, it messes you up. But I was arrogant. What's the worst that could happen? I thought this was the strongest stuff available. So I took it. Within 3 seconds, everything disappeared. Something came down from above and started suffocating me. I felt like my soul was leaving my body, but there was no such thing happening.
What was going through your mind at that moment?
I asked the people next to me, how much time do I have left? They were telling me how long the effects would last, but I thought I only had 2 minutes to live. I tried to say something before taking my last breath, but I couldn't get a single word out. I knew I was going to die. Then suddenly, I blacked out. When I woke up, I thought, did my family call? Are they looking for me? But then I felt an overwhelming hunger. I touched my stomach, and I realized only 10 minutes had passed, but to me, it felt like the end of the world. That was my worst death trip.
What about the second one?
The second one was with synthetic weed. I didn't know what it was. A friend handed it to me and said, you talk too much. Take this, just smoke it. And I did. The second one was with synthetic weed. I didn't know what it was. A friend handed it to me and said, you talk too much. Take this, just smoke it. And I did. We were about to leave the house. Suddenly, I hugged myself and screamed, wait, they're going to shoot us. At that moment, I felt like I was being shot, but I wasn't. Yet my body went into full-on spasms. It was as if I had actually been hit by a bullet.
Did hallucinations feel real? What happened?
Absolutely. For example, I would see someone pulling a knife on me, but in reality, nobody was moving. 1 second, we'd be talking. The next, someone would lunge at me with a knife. Then suddenly, they'd be sitting back down like nothing happened. But to me, I was already dead.
Did these experiences make you want to quit?
Yes, because none of it was real, but my brain accepted them as reality. And I had to go through this stress every single time. But the worst part, I kept using even though I knew this would happen. That's real addiction.
Did you still enjoy using?
After a while, it was pure torture. Even a normal person can't function after staying up for days. But in that world, the filth, the disrespect, the chaos, it completely destroys you. Nobody respects anyone. I used to protect my little brother with my life. But at the same time, I was going to a friend's house, using drugs with her, while her child was in the same room.
Now that you look back, would you ever allow that?
Never. Thinking about it now, I would never stand by and let a child be in that environment. And if someone had cared enough to stop me back then, maybe none of this would have happened.
If you think about it now, would you have stayed in that environment?
Never. Looking back now, I see that even the children in that environment were passive users. That little kid's shoulders would start trembling, but at the time, I didn't even care. Now I think about it. Would I have ever let that happen to my own little brother? Never. That's why I don't ever want to go back.
You called the thing you used to smoke meth a pipe, right?
Yes, you either use gas or hold a lighter to it. It produces an orange flame, and then you melt the pen perfume and inhale the vapor.
What I really want to talk about is this. Where do you buy these pen perfumes? Can you find them everywhere? And why are they even sold? Should selling them be allowed?
Every seller knows exactly why people buy them. Even when I was buying it, I'd pretend. Oh, does this one smell nice? But the guy just looked at me and laughed because he knew why I was buying it. And sellers see it as a profit. They even stock extra because they know exactly what they're selling. No one buys it for the scent. The scent disappears in a minute, but it makes access to drugs easier. It allows addicts to continue using more comfortably. They even sell pen perfume and gas in sets. At the time, I laughed while buying it. But honestly, it was a lifesaver for us back then.
Were there times you couldn't use because you didn't have pen perfume?
Yes, because without it, you couldn't smoke. You couldn't make a proper pipe. In fact, when I couldn't find pen perfume, I switched to needles. And after a while, everyone reaches that point. But pen perfume makes addiction so much easier.
Is it easier to find in certain places?
Absolutely. There are some neighborhood grocery stores where you'll never find it. But some convenience stores, you can tell just by looking at the guy selling it, because he uses too. People go to those stores specifically to buy pen perfume.
Do people treat guys and girls differently when buying it?
Yes, if a girl buys it, an addict might try to seduce her. If a guy buys it, they form a group to use together. It's a cycle that just keeps growing.
What bothered you the most?
There was a place I always bought pen perfume from, and a kid from my neighborhood, who was also an addict, noticed it. He saw me buying it all the time and figured out that I was using too. And since we lived in the same neighborhood, he knew where I lived. He started threatening me. He would come to my house. He knew my family, and he forced me to give him drugs.
Did you decide to quit out of spite?
I didn't come willingly. At first, I just thought, let me rest for a week at least. But I was exhausted. I only had two options left: go to jail or die. I was losing my family completely. No one trusted me anymore. I had no value in anyone's eyes. Even that started to wear me down.
How was your recovery process? What was your biggest treatment?
At first, I thought, they're going to kick me out anyway. I'm going to suffer. They'll probably just give me meds. But that's not what happened. At first, I struggled a lot. I got into fights. I begged for meds, but they didn't give me anything. Our teacher kept saying, let yourself go, like water. And honestly, that's exactly what happened. I was struggling, but everyone around me had struggled too, and we understood each other. That made me a little stronger. I finally had people who truly understood me. I wanted to work on something, because my mom trusted me the most. And just imagine, I completely shattered that trust. It was like I had ripped her arm off. That's why I first wanted to heal myself. Because if I could walk through that rehab center's door, that meant there was still hope. Not everyone is lucky enough to have their family behind them. But instead of holding onto a drug, I want to hold on to God. No matter how deep you sink, if you're patient, you can find a way out. Maybe it's easy to say and hard to do, but if you do it, you gain a whole new life.
What did this center give you?
When I first got there, I thought, these people can't be addicts. None of them looked like the people I knew. Then I realized I didn't look like I used to anymore either. I had gained almost 15 kilos. My face and eyes looked normal again. But inside, there's still a wound, because I still believe in things that aren't real. It's like I pretend nothing ever harmed me. But when I look in the mirror, I see how destroyed I was from lack of sleep, hunger, and exhaustion. Because in that world, you're always at war. Will the cops show up? Will I get caught? Will someone attack me? You have to constantly protect yourself, because when you use meth, you become a target. If you're a woman, you need to protect yourself twice as much. This center became my safe zone. For me, this place is safety. That's how I define it. Every night I spent here, I finally slept peacefully. An incredible sleep. No one would poke me, hurt me, or threaten me. Recovery isn't easy, but here I realized I wasn't alone. Whenever I struggled, someone would say, "I understand you." That phrase might sound simple, but it has so much meaning.
What kept you in rehab the most?
There was a woman inside, called her Healing Sister. If it weren't for her, would I have felt this connected to the place? Would I have opened up as much? Probably not, because she treated me like a mother. She made everything feel okay again. She would even show me a tree and say, "Look, we have a tree here," like she was talking to a little child, and she made me love this place. Now, when I think about leaving, I want to be like her. This place feels like home now. Whenever I step outside, it feels like I'm leaving my house.
How do you think your family feels now?
I wasn't the only one who burned. Everyone at home burned too. But now, I can even joke with my dad. I tell him, "Sleep must be good for you. You go to bed earlier now." And he laughs, because he sees that I've changed. Before, I had started to stutter. But now, he tears in my eyes. They're tears of happiness, tears of longing. But now, it's a sweet kind of longing.
What would you do to stop yourself on the day you decided to use drugs for the first time?
I would do anything. If I had to, I would tie myself down, because instead of living with addiction, I would rather die. Addiction doesn't kill you instantly. It just turns you into the walking dead, and I wouldn't want her to die like that.
Did you ever attempt suicide?
No, I never consciously tried to take my life, but I felt the fear of death over and over again. Maybe I never attempted it because I was always a little afraid of dying. But after I started injecting meth, would say to myself, "I'm going to take this hit, and I'm going to die." I don't know. Was that a desire to die, or just complete surrender? But either way, I kept using. My entire body would go numb,
How long would you stay awake?
sometimes 8 days straight. And by the end of it, I would think, this is it. I'm going to die now. This will be my suicide. But actually ending it myself? Shooting myself, jumping off a building, cutting my wrists. I never did that.
Did you see people who did?
Yes, I saw people who used just to die. People who genuinely wanted to die. And I lost a friend that way. But here's the thing. Most users were trying to die. And we thought they actually did. Hay would just collapse and stay there. Then somehow they would wake up again. That's addiction. God doesn't let you die. But He doesn't let you live either. You just crawl through existence to the very end.
What would you say to families with addicted children?
Trust them, but don't lose hope. Hold on to them. Help them fight. Because sooner or later, there will be a turning point. Something will change. But don't ever think my child would never do this. Because my family thought the same thing. And years passed.
If you like this video, please support us by liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. That way, this story can reach more people. Thank you for watching.